this weekend we've seen a lot of really easy matchups, and here we are. We're going to be entering into Knockout Sunday. But first, before I talk about predictions that are finalized for the brackets, I kind of want to go over the matches a little bit. So first, you had the Atlanta Rain and London Spitfire. Atlanta absolutely destroying the Spitfire. I believe they even got the fastest map time on Volskaya, hitting in at 450 or 452, with their remaining time being 1:08 to capture both objectives. Just showing that Atlanta is one of the top teams in NA. Definitely on the tier of Dallas, but definitely one of the most dominant teams this year. Which after was the most disappointing matchup that I've seen. It is the Boston Uprising, who absolutely destroyed the Houston Outlaws. I have absolutely no idea what Houston was thinking, or really what they were doing, because Houston was just playing what they normally do. And they fell apart. And you have Boston, who surprisingly did really well this weekend. They 3-0'd Houston, and then sure, they lost against Atlanta, but other than that, the only team that took a map off of them was Vancouver. Other than that, they got 3-0 on their other two matches, and then they lost 3-0 to Atlanta, which was pretty disappointing. But to see Boston like this was really surprising and really exciting. The disappointing part about that is where they are in the bracket right now. They're going to have to go through Atlanta again, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit more. Then yesterday, we had the Justice 3-0 the Spitfire in a pretty obvious matchup. Justice just kind of not playing Jerry and doing well. That's kind of what's carried them throughout most of this tournament, is just not playing Jerry, because Jerry is not as good as Decay or Assassin. That's just the honest truth, which gave them a big upper hand against the London Spitfire. The Gladiators and the Defiant. Defiant just looking pretty weak out there. Then we got to see just the Gladiators kind of prove their preseason hype, with having like Moth and Bergering in them. Definitely proven to be a top tier threat in this tournament, using the Defiant as an example. Then we saw the battle for Texas. Going off of Boston's match, and actually their previous matches, because I thought all the matches that they've had were close matchups, but apparently not. As Dallas beat Outlaws 3-0, especially after the 3-0 loss that they took to Boston the day previous. That was really disappointing in my thoughts. It's still, Houston's doing what they've been doing, and it obviously didn't work against Dallas, didn't work against Boston. And I'm really hoping that after the June Joust heading into, the Summer Showdown entering Countdown Cup, they're able to pick it up and they're able to finally hit Hawaii, hopefully. Atlanta. So now, I originally had Atlanta winning 3-2. And after Houston, I was like, I decided to put the Stonks of Boston. And if you remember back, I believe it was into the June Joust, that was the May Melee, I had Boston, I put my Stonks in Boston and I failed. And I knew I was going to fail again because of Stand 1. Stand 1 through the game against Paris that costed them in getting into that tournament. And just the team kind of fell apart here. Boston didn't really feel like Boston from weeks previous. they felt a lot weaker than we had originally seen from them in last week or two. That kind of like dominant Boston we've been seeing this entire tournament up to now. But that does lock them into the first matchup against the Washington Justice, in which if they beat the Justice, they will go on to face Atlanta. And this is where will Boston be able to go to Hawaii? Likely not, because Justice also looking like a dominant team, but their obsession with Jerry. Playing Jerry on the hit scan over Decay, or playing Decay on Tracer and Jerry playing something like Ash, kind of locks them into that composition, and that's why they went map 5 against Gladiators today, is just playing Jerry over Decay, because Jerry's your hit scan specialist. Even though Decay has proven time and time again he is one of the strongest hit scans in the league, as well as one of, if not the best Tracer in the league, up there with players like Carpe, and Justice just only lets him play that, which is definitely one of their downfalls, which is why I'm almost certain that Boston's going to win against Justice. And then we're going to see this rematch happen, which is going to be pretty disappointing unless Boston can learn from today and take the game away from Atlanta. Then Defiant Dallas. Dallas has been a strong team, and they proved that with going 4-0 today, settling out for one of 2 perfect records, the other being Shanghai. Dallas locks in first seed, which they will have to face either the Gladiators or the Eternal, which they're going to beat either team, sending Dallas easily to Hawaii. Justice and Gladiators. I had this going to the Gladiators by just a close margin, and it almost ended that way. It was a denial of a reverse sweep, which would have been hilarious if I would have predicted. It definitely wasn't how I probably would have seen it. I probably would have had to go kind of back and forth. But to see the Justice kind of fall apart up until my example from earlier, switching out Jerry for Decay, or at least in that case, Assassin, so they can go back to playing a better composition, because Jerry is definitely not a very good hit scan. He was good on Boston last year, but that's only because of the fact that Boston's team really wasn't that good, except for Jerry. I feel like the reason why Jerry was looked so highly upon was because he was surrounded by people like Punk and Color Hex, who could not pick up kills, so he's the only one who was able to do it. And now that he's on the Justice, he's surrounded by Decay, Assassin, Mag, Fury, Closer, Bebe. So many really, really strong players. And so now he is easily the weakest link on the team because of that. Maybe not so much Bebe and Closer as being damage dealers, as they're support players. But definitely see some really good sleep darts and that. Good assists from the supports. But Jerry, compared to Decay on the hit scan, it's a huge margin between the two. And that is what really caused Justice to start falling against the Gladiators. But they were able to pick it up in the map 5 on, I believe it was Busan, as their 5th map. But it was definitely a great match. I personally enjoyed it. It was a little bit happy for me, because then if Gladiators 3-0'd Justice, we would have actually seen Shock go in over the Justice. But instead we saw Justice and Gladiators both locking in their position here over Defiant and the Shock. Going to the East region, yesterday morning we saw Spark take a map 5 to Nixel. Nixel looking really strong, surprisingly, for this tournament, as they did last tournament in the June Joust. They were definitely a good team then. They're proving it again when they locked their position into the knockout rounds. But the Spark picked up the victory. It was a close one. It was definitely a fairly decent match. I haven't watched it, but I do know that it had some really close back and forth battles from watching parts of the encore on Friday. Then Chengdu in the Fusion. I had the feeling that Fusion was going to be on one of their strong weeks here, but they weren't, which is why I actually switched my prediction of Nixel Fusion from 3-1 Fusion to 3-1 Nixel. I'll talk on that in a minute, but the Fusion definitely looking really weak in this entire week. They had a close match against the Hunters, but definitely was not one of their best showings, in my opinion. Shanghai Valiant, I'm not even going to really talk about it. It's Valiant. But one thing that was surprising was looking at the pick'ems last night, and seeing it be 0-3, and I get 0 points because the pick'ems had the score wrong. It had it flipped where Shanghai got 3-0'd by Valiant, something that never would happen. But instead, it was finally corrected here, now that I'm actually noticing it. But then now on to Saturday, today, this morning. The New York Excelsior beating the Fusion. I saw this happening just because Fusion did not really do all that well against the Hunters. Even though they went map 5, it was still kind of a call to what the rest of the week is, because that's how Fusion has been. It's either they have a really strong week or a really weak week. And it was obviously one of their down weeks rather than one of their good ones, which is why I switched my vote over to Nixel winning. Again, just like Shanghai match, it's the LA Valiant. Nothing really discussed there. And then Spark Dragons, I switched this to being a 3-0 just because of how many 3-0s have been this week. But Spark actually able to take a map, even though Dragons still won the match in the end. But that would bring it into Shanghai's knockouts, of Apac's knockouts being Shanghai, Seoul, Nixel, and the Hunters, I believe. And then you have the West region being the Gladiators, the Uprising, the Rain, the Fuel, the Eternals, and the Justice. So, off the top of my head, I don't remember Apac's matches or East region, but the likely matchup, the likely victors of their matches will be the Atlanta Rain and the Dallas Fuel, or it will be the Justice instead of the Fuel, or not instead of the Fuel, but instead of the Rain. But I do have my stonks into the Atlanta Rain. But in the East region, Shanghai is definitely going to be going. It's just a question of which are the other teams, which I'm actually going to go check. Yeah, so it is the New York Excelsior against the Shanghai Dragon, and then the Seoul Dynasty against the Chengdu Hunters, which I am going to give it to Seoul, leaving it to be the Shanghai Dragons and the Seoul Dynasty from the East region, and then you have the Dallas Fuel and the Atlanta Rain from the West region. I'm excited for the Summer Showdown. It's going to be definitely a strong competition going into the tournament. And it's going to be exciting to see Seal Dynasty go against a team like the Dallas Fuel and the Atlanta Reign. But those are my picks for the Summer Showdown Knockout Sunday. It's only a matter of time before we get to see who's going and who's going home. And I'm excited to see it.